Hello, hackers, and welcome back. I am showing you this meme of Jean-Luc Picard saying yes very emphatically because I'm very excited that you're getting the idea that identity is constructed and not just something that is fixed and stable. It can be performed in different ways in different communities. So one of the things that we need to think about is how we're going to make our argument based on that insight of how the digital community performs certain types of identity. Now, some of you are still confused, and that's okay. This is a pretty heavy concept, but let me explain it a little more and give you some ways that you can think about this if you're still stuck on this working thesis about how identity is constructed in your digital community. Identity is something that a lot of people take for granted, but it does change a bit when you're in different social situations. Now, this doesn't mean that you're one person in one place and a completely different person in the other place, but let me give you a real life example. You perform your identity differently when you go to church among that social group than you perform it when you go out to the bar with your friends, right? This doesn't mean you're not the same person, but you would perform your identity in different ways because there are expectations of that community. Certain ways of behaving and dressing that are expected in that particular social situation. Now, many of you, I think, may have been a bit confused by the readings because they seem to be a little bit radical. The changing of identity in Second Life is, changing your whole look and creating a 3D digital body. And that is one example of performing identity in a digital community. But it doesn't have to be that drastic, right? It could be the way that people put up profile pictures or the way that people post in certain ways. I know the mods in the Facebook group that I'm in have a little badge by their post, right? So that shows that they have some authority, some credibility, or we could say ethos in that digital community. So I want to read one of the working theses that I really thought brought this out and showed that it doesn't have to be something like Second Life where you're creating a whole fictional identity. The identity can be more subtle. So Jordan Ray Matthew, in one of my courses here, did a digital community of Montana growers and farmers and gardeners, and this is the thesis. Quote, "The photos serve the same purpose by giving an individual an identity. I think that visuals make the digital self a reality and paint a chosen identity for others to see." And Jordan goes on by explaining that the pictures of the plants posted are one of the things that help create identity for members in this forum that is dedicated to gardening. So I would imagine that someone posting a big healthy plant would be performing their identity as a good gardener, right? So it doesn't have to be that someone is creating this strange fictional identity with a 3D body. Really, anything that is posted in these groups is a way of performing that person's identity. At the very least, they have a some type of pseudonym that they've chosen, right? A handle, a username that they've chosen. And that is also one way that they've decided to perform their identity. So I think this is a great example. Jordan's example is a great example of a digital community performing identity, but not doing it in this kind of super extravagant way of creating a whole 3D avatar. Like I mentioned last time, it's hard to find good scholarship on these digital communities, partially because they're so new. And so the scholarship tends to focus on the gamers and, Second Life virtual worlds and that sort of stuff. But I think that reading over your working theses, the ones that you have up there right now, most of you are on point. And you're getting what I'm trying to get you to understand and perform through your blog is an argument about how identity is constructed or performed or expressed in the digital community that you're researching. So if you're still confused, even after that explanation, check out the working theses of some of your colleagues on the discussion board. It should be open. You should be able to see them all. It's not cheating, right? You're just taking a look and see how they're describing or how they're arguing that identity is constructed in that digital community. And that might give you some ideas for how identity is constructed or performed or expressed in your digital community. All right, so let's take a look at the word cloud. So not only are we trying to create a good arguable position or a stance on how identity is performed in our digital communities, but we're wanting to create a good argument to be able to persuade the readers that the point that we make is indeed a valid point. So this is the first word cloud here. This is from section 53, group 2. And I want to point out some things that participants, social public's identity, impression, roles, interpretation, these are all great codes for focusing on the topic of this blog, right? We're really focusing on social roles and identity. We're interpreting that, right? What is our opinion of how these social roles or identities are, or our impression of how they are performed in the digital communities that we're researching? Let's move on to the next word cloud. So this is a good word cloud for the topic that we're focusing in on, right? So let's move to the next one. And I think this one gives us a little broader picture of arguments in general, which is great. This is one thing we also need. Not only are we understanding the digital identity part, which is one component of this blog, but we're trying to understand the argument in general. And so you can see that ethos, pathos, attitude, logos, facts, tone, voice, examples, anecdotes, statistics, illustrations, quotations, these are all things that we can expect to be in a good argument. That doesn't mean they all have to be there, right? You might not have statistics or anecdotes, right? Or you might have one or the other. But we can expect all of these to be in a good argument. Oh, I'm sorry. That was section 54, group 1. All right. So the next one here is from section 54, group 2. And they have a lot of the same common codes of a good argument, right? We need credibility, another word for ethos, attitude, opposition. I'm imagining that as an opposing point of view. So that's a good thing that you could build into your blog. If you don't go into the opposing point of view too far, you just give a good, strong argument against your thesis and then disprove it. That is a great way to enhance the argument. We have examples, facts, thesis. It's definitely persuasive. That is the purpose of this blog. focus on audience and the message. So these are all great common codes to think about when you're writing your rough draft of your argument blog, your digital identity argument blog. And then the last word cloud that I found, claims, credibility, attitude, tone, logos, evidence, pathos, ethos. We have the rhetorical triangle in there again. I thought this was very interesting that respect was the largest common code in this word cloud. And the way that I interpret that is perhaps a tone of respect, right? That you want to have a respectful tone, not an angry tone, right? You're trying to persuade your audience, and so you don't want to make them think that you're less than credible without it. If you use a professional tone, that is going to go toward building your credibility. So these are all excellent examples of word clouds for the digital identity argument blog. And again, this was the hardest genre to decrypt because it wasn't quite as visible, all of those codes, until we got into the reading and looking examples from our readings from Bolstroff, Boyd, and Castronova. So really all of these codes can be put under one of these categories, right? This is the rhetorical triangle. And if you read about this, it really is the main ways that we can use, the main tools that we would use to persuade anybody of anything. Any argument that you make, whether it be a political argument, whether it be an argument, a religious argument, or an argument about money, any argument that you make, you would be using these three tools to try to persuade your audience. Logos, like many of you pointed out, numbers, statistics, facts, making sure that you quote people accurately and that you give credit to the people who you're quoting. This all falls under logos, right? In that logic and reasoning and proof need to be clear. Reasoning is more complicated, and we delve into that in the next class in analytic writing. But one way you can think about it is that you have a strong thesis and that you give good reasons to back up that thesis with good evidence from the digital community that you've researched, whether that be quotes, observations, survey answers. So logic is one of the main ways that we persuade somebody or anybody of anything. Ethos is credibility, and quotes come into here too. If you're misquoting somebody or quoting them out of context, you're not going to have a very credible presence as a writer, and so you want to focus on that credibility and ethos. Another great way to build your credibility in this blog in particular is to quote from some of these very credible scholars that we've read, either from the video we watched on identity, that you could quote from that. We could quote from either Bolstroff, Boyd, or Castronova if you think they make a point that sounds helpful in arguing about identity in your digital community. Go ahead and quote them, right? This will just increase the credibility of your argument. It will increase your ethos by bringing scholars with credibility already into your argument. Now, pathos is something that we don't talk about a whole lot when it comes to rhetoric when we're writing, but we do see it every day in arguments being made. My favorite example of pathos has to be the Sarah McLachlan video about rescue dogs, because it definitely tears at the heartstrings. It uses emotion to try to get its point across. So logos, ethos, and pathos are the three ways that we use our we try to persuade an audience. And so all of these codes really could fall under one of these three headings. These are the main ways that we persuade. So your working thesis, if you're still working on your working thesis, definitely do that. But let me know when you upload it, because I'd like to give you feedback on it. Make sure you're going in the right direction. So even if you get it up late, shoot me an email and let me know so I can read it and make sure that it is a good working thesis, and that you are going to be able to develop this blog from it. You know, a working thesis is just a main idea. It's an argument that you think you could support with evidence, and it's a rough draft. We have a working thesis or a rough draft thesis for our rough draft blog. One thing that you want to make sure is that your working thesis is something that others might be able to argue with. It shouldn't just be a statement of fact, but it should be something that is compelling. And if you can back that up, the more compelling, the better. So still work on those working theses, but while you're writing, you don't want to have to stick to that thesis if the evidence isn't helping back that up. You can change that thesis, sharpen it up, change it up, however it needs to be worked so that it is arguable, compelling, and it fits the rest of your argument throughout the blog. So don't be afraid of changing up the thesis if you need to while you're writing. That's why it's called a working thesis. So for Wednesday, what I'll need you to do is make sure to get at least half your draft up. That's 500 words, because the draft is 1,000, right? So at least half the blog, which is about 500 words, with your working thesis, with your quotes and your evidence. Make sure to have your works cited page along with it, just so we can follow along to see where those citations come from. But if we get our drafts up by Wednesday, that means that we'll be able to answer questions for everyone in the group by Saturday at midnight. So get your drafts to your group by Wednesday, whether you're using Discord or Blackboard or Snapchat, which one of our groups is. I don't care what tool you use, as long as you're able to get the drafts to each other. Of course, if you're not using Blackboard or Discord, let me know. I'm not on Snapchat. I actually feel I'm too old for it, but I'm glad that that one group is able to get that group work done over Snapchat. Whatever digital tools you can use and that work, I'm all for. But you want to get that 500 words to your group, and then we want to answer questions for the group and get all that feedback to everybody by Saturday at midnight, so that we'll have enough feedback to be able to revise. Now, just like we always do we have been doing the last couple times with the peer reviews, if your group seems too big to peer review everybody's blog, you can work out with your group ways that you can minimize the workload. But I want to make sure that everybody gets at least 2 or 3 sets of questions for their feedback. That will allow them to get good feedback, think about the revisions, and be able to revise. If your group isn't very active and you need to find a new group for this peer review, let me know. And make sure, if you guys are working on something where you're not having to do everybody's in the group, that you're working out a system that's fair and that makes sure that you don't leave anybody out, right? We don't want someone to not have some feedback on their blog, because they'll need that feedback to revise and get the best final blog turned in for this last blog assignment. I have put up your grades for the group work that you did on the word clouds and the common codes, and for the working theses with feedback. And if you don't see a grade for your group work, but you did that group work, just shoot me an email and let me know. I tried to give you credit if you were doing it with other tools, but I definitely want to know, so double check those grades. We're coming very close to the end, and the finish line is pretty close. So I want to congratulate everyone on sticking it out and getting to this phase where we're drafting the last blog, the Digital Identity Argument blog. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, if you're confused by this last assignment, which is a tough assignment, feel free to send me an email, jump on Discord and chat with me. Several of you have already. Give me a call. I really want to be able to help you get to the finish line. All right, hackers. Well, I hope you have a good week of drafting and giving feedback, and I hope to see you all online.